Welcome to the studio. You're listening to Willow Waves, a student-produced podcast where kindergarten through 6th graders explore interests, promote solutions to global concerns, and communicate about everything related to our social and emotional learning.
We aim to amplify voices, share knowledge, and encourage conversations. Visit us at willowspringses.fcps.edu to learn more and subscribe.
Join us as we explore our diverse and dynamic world of elementary education.
There were thousands of bees in a hive, hanging on a tree, all being destroyed by many things. Half of the beehive was crippling and crawling around, being mutated, and their wings breaking every 5 seconds because of many things. There are pesticides around the hive which greatly endangered the bees, and the ancient giant hornet is attacking them, and many mites are invading the hive. Today, this podcast will cover bees and their near extinction.
Do pesticides really do that much to bees? And there's no way a hornet can kill that many bees in one hive.
It's not just one hive, it's all of them. Tons of hives have been killed by the hornets and pesticides.
I mean, maybe the reason of all the honeybees are dying is because of the cutting down of places that bees live in. Is that the main reason for bees dying?
It's probably way more than that.
Like what?
Well, there are also very harmful pesticides that people put into the grass and soil to control pests.
How bad could it really be?
Think about it. You can kill most insects with pesticides. That includes bees. But something even worse is how much pesticides can spread. A bee goes into a flower with pesticides. It gets the pesticides all over it. It carries itself to the hive. The poison gets in the hive. The other bees get poison on themselves. And it's not like there is only one poison particle on one flower. There are thousands of flowers with thousands of poison and thousands of bees. Just imagine a hive with that much poison. And it'll take a while to recover because all of the pesticides can affect the reproductive process for a while.
Wow, even though pesticides can help with farming, it affects bees very badly.
And not just bees, it can affect all types of pollinators. There are a lot of types of pollinators.
Well, I've also heard of something called the varroa mite. It's a little brown parasite of honeybees.
What does it do?
It puts them in great danger.
Well, of course, but how does it put them in grave danger?
Well, the varroa mite attaches itself to the bee. If the beekeepers are not careful, the varroa mite can get inside the hive. The female varroa mites slip into the broods of the larvae and pupa. After that, they start attaching themselves to the pupa larva, and then they suck out the bee's blood. Once the bees are fully grown, their lifespan gets shortened by a lot. And maybe sometimes the bee is crippling and hardly crawling around. Their wings and other parts are very deformed. Also, they give the bees many viruses that can kill them quickly.
Oh, just like mosquitoes and ticks, but even worse?
Yep.
I might research it. Apparently, a lot of hives are infected. But as the varroa mite's population increases, a lot more hives will be infested. Even worse, a hive can be fully destroyed with a lot of crippling bees in 1 to 3 years. And remember, it'll be a lot quicker when their population has increased.
Well, we know that humans can kill bees, but are there any other insects that can kill bees?
Well, hornets and wasps attack bees, but not all the time. I think that pesticides and climate change are the main causes of killing bees.
Well, clearly we don't know that much about bees, but luckily we can use time travel to go through the most important times for bees.
Here we are in the 1600s, where people are colonizing America. They brought bees for farming and used honey. They also brought bees to pollinate the crops that the people farmed. They were very important to farm, and if they haven't brought honeybees to Jamestown, we would have no honey.
Wait, I didn't know honeybees were an invasive species.
Well, not an invasive species, but more like they were brought in for good.
Phew.
Humans have been eating honey for a long time in history.
That's right. Also, honey is very delicious.
It's okay.
How dare you say that about honey?
Well, anyway, we should get going to another time period.
Where?
8th century BCE in Greece.
Wait, what?
Here we are in ancient Greece.
Oh, are those people using pesticides?
Yes, ancient Greece was recorded as one of the first places to have pesticides used.
How do people know?
Because Homer the poet referenced them in some of his poems.
Oh.
And now we shall go to probably the worst point in history for bees.
Stop teleporting without my permit!
Here we are in Florida, 1987.
Why are we here now?
Because this is when the varroa mite was introduced into America. The varroa mite was originally in Asia, but was expected to be imported by cargo. The varroa mite was in America.
Is that a beehive?
Yes, and can you guess why we just teleported to that specific beehive?
Oh, the varroa mite must have infected this hive.
Of course! We should look inside, but also wear protective gear not to get stung. Oh, that is a lot of tiny parasites.
I feel bad for the bees.
We should really go back home. We have seen what it is like to see the varroa mite, but I had an idea. We should interview a scientist and understand any other things about bees. Let's teleport!
Wait, no! You seriously need to stop teleporting without my permission.
Anyway, we should go to the scientist and interview them. Apparently they are a backyard beekeeper.
What's that?
We will see. And now to the interview.
Hello.
How's it going?
Okay.
We have some questions for you about backyard beekeeping and all that stuff.
Okay, great.
Yeah. What made you want to become a backyard beekeeper?
Well, my grandfather was a beekeeper. So he had bees, but he was also a farmer. And it turns out if you want to be a farmer and you don't have any land, you can do it by being a beekeeper because you don't have to have land to be a beekeeper. And bees are very interesting creatures as well. They have a social life that has been studied for thousands of years. And people really are amazed by bees.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I didn't know about that before.
Yeah, bees. I didn't know. Bees are really amazing. If you've ever seen a hive with all the bees crawling around, it's kind of amazing to watch them do their work and stuff.
Yep. It really is.
And also, can you tell us what it is like to be a backyard beekeeper?
Sure. It's like being a farmer, except that you don't have land, as I said. That means your activities are very determined by the season and how far north or south you live and what the weather is and what the daylight is. Every day different, every year is different. You basically, your job is to take care of the bees and make sure they are really healthy. So it means inspecting your hives no more than is necessary, but as often as necessary. And then when you inspect them, you need to know what you're looking at. But as long as you know what you're looking at, which takes a while, and you make some mistakes, but you check and see how they're doing. And when they're doing well in the springtime around here, they make a lot of honey. So like last year, I got over 100 pounds of honey. So then that's really fun to harvest the honey at the end of the nectar flow. And then once the nectar flow is over, you put that honey into bottles, and I give mine away. So I don't sell it, but a lot of people sell it. Then you get the bees ready for winter, and then all winter long they're out there sitting in the cold in their beehive. And once in a while on a warm day, if it gets above 48 or 49 degrees, they'll come out and fly around, and you can see how they're doing. And you make sure they have enough food in the winter, and then you get ready for spring and start all over again.
That sounds pretty hard, but it sounds like spring is the best season for bees, right?
Yep. Around here, it very much depends on where you live. I was just in Florida last week talking to the beekeepers there. They have some nectar flow all year. Up in Vermont, where I grew up, starting in May, from May to September. But around here, it's just April, May, and June. So it varies very much by the place and what grows there. Yeah.
It's also very nice of you to give out all the honey that you harvest.
Yeah, well, my beekeeping partner and I, my partner has a not-for-profit that puts gardens into the inner city of Washington, D.C. So she gives the honey away to her donors, the people who donate money to help her do that work.
You were
And then
also,
I give it to my friends. Yeah.
You were also talking about the north and south for beekeeping. Is north or south better to do?
It's not so much the difference, because even up in Calgary, Canada, which is pretty far north, it's winter and dark for 6 months of the year, but it's summer and light for 6 months of the year. So it's a very good spot for the bees, except they can't possibly survive through the winter. But some beekeepers are beginning to figure out how to do that. So I'd say the best place is, well, what commercial beekeepers do is they follow the blossoming crops around the country. So they move their bees from place to place look for the nectar flows.
Are more people around the world starting backyard colonies to help the population grow?
I think they are, especially in the middle class incomes, and they're moving from the countryside into the cities. And so those people are quite interested in keeping bees. But a lot of the people in the world are extremely poor. I mean, what we pay for a cup of coffee at a Starbucks, the whole family has to live on for a day. So they're very, very poor. And so for those people, keeping bees and getting the honey is a good source of income, especially if they get more than they need themselves and they can sell it. And furthermore, if they keep those bees, it helps their crops too. So it's good in both ways.
It sounds like backyard beekeeping is starting to grow.
Yep, I would say the number in the United States has possibly doubled in the last 10 or 15 years.
Also, wouldn't it be expensive to buy a hive and get all the bees?
Yeah, it really is. So you've got to have some what they call surplus income. After your needs are met, you need to have some money you can decide on how you want to spend it. But I would say you should put aside at least $1,000 in the U.S. If you have wood, you can make your own hives. Your bees are healthy, or you can catch swarms of bees. You can catch the bees instead of buying them. But you need to know how to do that, so you need to be a beekeeper before you can do it. And also, you can't really count on making money from the honey or from the other products. You better be prepared to spend the money, even if you might have a chance to make some.
Backyard beekeeping be like an investment? You may pay a lot at first for the hive, but you can get more and more money.
No, it just keeps you just keep spending. There's a joke about how you make $1 million being a beekeeper. Start with $2 million.
Also, what is colony monitoring technology?
Well, typically bees are kept in a box, a wooden box, and you can't see into that box unless you open it. If you open it, you disturb the bees, so you never see what they're actually doing. But if you stick some sort of a sensor into the box, then the sensor can give you a hint about what the bees are doing. And so, for example, an easy one is called a hive scale. So you just set the beehive on a scale that's designed for that, and you can see if the whole colony, the whole thing, is gaining weight or losing weight. And if they're gaining weight during the nectar flow, they're probably healthy. If they're losing weight during the nectar flow, they're probably not healthy, and you better open the box up and see what's going on, and so on, for what the weight should be, and how quickly gaining and losing it should be, depends on the time of year. So you have to know that by experience or from other beekeepers. But just the hive scale can tell you a lot.
Wow, it may help backyard beekeepers grow their business.
Yes, I think it's good for improving the health and productivity of your bees. Another sensor is the temperature, just a thermometer. And if you stick a thermometer inside your beehive and it's connected to the internet, then you know that bees keep their brood at 95 degrees Fahrenheit. So as long as there's a temperature of 95 degrees Fahrenheit in your brood box, or 35 degrees Celsius, then you know your bees have brood in the box. And in the wintertime, they keep when it's cold outside, colder than 50 degrees, they make a small ball a tight ball, a tight cluster, and eat honey and flex their muscles to keep warm. It's like, you get warm when you're jumping around and exercising. And so that's what they do, is they flex their flight muscles, and that keeps them warm no matter how cold it is outside, down to 20 below. They can still keep warm as long as they've got food. So sticking a temperature sensor tells you if there's brood in the summertime and if the cluster is okay in the wintertime. And because they tend to move around, if you put a thermometer in every box, you can tell where the bees are and what they're doing there.
That sounds kind of amazing. You don't really need like super expensive technology. You could just use a thermometer to see how good the bees are.
That's right. It's a typical indoor-outdoor thermometer will give you a very good idea of what's going on inside. But we do play with other things. There's somebody who made a video camera that looks at the hive entrance and figures out, counts the bees coming and going. And there's another guy who made a radar device that counts the bees. And people put microphones in the hive to tell what the bees are, how they're feeling, if they're healthy or not. So there's a lot of different ways that people build these sensors for the hives.
Yeah, that's pretty cool for like just bees.
Yeah. And do you know about the drone congregation areas?
No, I've never heard of that before.
Okay, well, when the bees mate, the queen bee doesn't mate with the male bees, the drones, in her own hive. She flies off somewhere and finds some guys to have sex with. Well, where do the guys go? It turns out, nobody knew this for thousands of years, but all the guys, all the drones go out to some spot up in the sky and they all hang out there, okay? And it's called the drone congregation area. So when a young queen comes out and needs to find a mate, she can smell that and flies to it. But where they were, nobody knew. And one of our beekeepers has a UAV, also called a drone, that you can fly around with a camera on it. So she puts some queen pheromone, so it smells like a queen, on a long string under the drone, and then she flies it around looking for these drone congregation areas. So there's all kinds of things you can do with bees that are really quite fun.
Yeah, so the technology, even though it can help understand the health of bees, it can also help you understand like more about bees themselves.
Exactly, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah,
It would probably also be funny to see the drone bees like following the drone.
Yes. Yep. It is.
Why do you use glass observation hives?
Oh, for the same reason I use the sensors, to see what the bees are doing inside the box.
So
The trouble is that an observation hive is glass, but bees like to build their honeycomb parallel to each other. So that doesn't work for an observation hive because you want to see both sides of each comb. So you make a stack of combs, one on top of each other, and that works okay, but it's not ideal. The bees will live there, but it's not ideal for them. So you have to feed them and you have to keep them inside a building so that it works okay. But it's a good way to see what the bees are doing. My first colony was in a glass observation hive. I had it in my guest bedroom, and I had it there I finally moved it to my dining room, but I had one for over 10 years right in my house. Around here, you can find them in nature centers, or some schools have them.
The observation hives would be indoors because I would think that the glass would like get like heated up or get cold, so the bees would like change temperature.
Yeah, but indoors, of course, the temperature is more or less even, and it's still okay. It's close enough to the 95 degrees so they can keep the brood at 95, and then they're not in a cage. You have to have a tube that goes out the window, so the bees are free to come and go, and forage and poop and do everything they do outside, but they live in this hive that's inside where you can see everything they do. In fact, my friend Phil Frank also has an observation hive in his house. And the two of us were so impressed by what we knew compared to what other beekeepers knew that we decided to make a book about everything you can see in an observation hive with the naked eye.
Well,
And we just published that book. Yeah. So,
that's actually pretty cool though.
yeah.
So from what I hear, it sounds like glass observation hives can help, but it's kind of still in the making of like being the best. It's not
Yeah,
great.
it's educational. It's not productive. It's the bees will accept it, but it's not optimal for the bees. It's really all about educating humans.
Can you tell us more about beekeeping with disabilities?
I can tell you a little more. My eyesight has been failing for several years now. So when I look at this screen when I'm looking at you, I just see you as a couple of blobs. Over here on my large screen, I can get close to the screen and then I can see your faces. So that means when I pick up a frame of bees and look at it, I have no idea what's going on there. So all my beekeeping now I do with a partner, and my partner can see the bees, but I have 2 or 3 times as much experience. So we work together. We make our plans, we buy our stuff, I can lift things, I can move things. I'm not disabled in that way. I'm just visually disabled. And you can't really keep bees totally by yourself if you're disabled in most cases. You basically need to keep bees with a partner, but it doesn't need to stop you. And I think being disabled may stop some people from even trying to be a beekeeper, which is a shame. And it may stop people who become old, like me, I'm 77, people become old and they get disabled just from their age. Like old beekeepers, you can tell when you go to a beekeeping conference, you can tell the real old beekeepers, they're not just old, but they're all bent over and they walk with a limp and their back hurts because they've been lifting these heavy boxes for so many years. But rather than stop beekeeping, they get helpers, and the helpers work with them to do the part they can't do.
Wow.
So, there's, bees can tell you a lot, as I said, from the temperature, and you can tell a lot by listening to them. So if you have good ears, even if you can't see, you can hear what's going on, and so on. There's a lot of ways you can compensate, but in most cases you need a helper.
When you said beekeeping with disabilities, I thought you meant the bees had disabilities.
Oh, no, it's the beekeepers. Yeah. The bees have got plenty of problems, but they're not disabled.
Is that the main reason you quit beekeeping and then you retired?
No, I retired from a different job. I was an artificial intelligence engineer in an engineering company. Yeah. No, the beekeeping has always just been a hobby for me.
Oh.
What is your hope for the future of beekeeping?
Well, right now with climate change, I'm pretty concerned about the future of beekeeping. As the climate changes, the plants blooming time changes, and the plants that grow in any certain place changes, which means that the habits of the native bees and native plants evolved together. And most native plants have a native bee that works just on them. And most native bees work on just one or a few plants. So they've really closely evolved together. And as the climate changes, those bees and plants can't do what they've been doing for hundreds of thousands of years. So that's a problem. But I think they will adapt naturally. But for food and agriculture, for growing food, like you probably know, many of the foods we eat, especially the fruits and the vegetables, the nuts and the berries, are all pollinated by honeybees. Not the wheat and the corn, but most of the other things are. And then even things like you think, well, I'll just eat meat. Yeah, but the animals that grow the meat eat plants, and those plants have to have seeds, and those seeds have to be pollinated by a honeybee. So there's no way around it. Honeybees are required for our food. And I think with the disruptions in climate change, there's going to be disruptions in population and where people live and how they live. And I think there'll be disruptions in the food supply. So my hope is that we make it through the disruptions in some way that everybody will have enough to eat. But I'm not particularly optimistic.
So, funnily enough, we have already written a question that kind of relates to what you just said about our last question.
Mhm.
Is there anything you could actually do to the hive to help with climate change, or do we just have to help the bees?
To help with climate change? I don't think so. I think what we can do is, well, the one thing we can do is this, that everywhere there are humans in the world, pretty much, there are honeybees. Okay? So when climate change comes to your area, you can find the bees in the world that are adapted to that particular microclimate and bring those bees in. The other thing you can do is select bees that can adapt to that change. But I don't think you can prevent or reduce climate change by doing something with bees. I think you can only help the bees adapt to it so that people have food and that there's a variety of natural life in the world, and help those things adapt. The way to prevent climate change, as far as I understand it, is to reduce carbon dioxide in the air. And I guess plants absorb carbon dioxide, so if the bees help the plants grow, you could say that's a help. But that's stretching it, because they would probably grow without beekeepers. I don't know.
Wouldn't the food chain disrupt if bees went extinct?
Oh yeah, very definitely. Yes. Yep. And that's a real problem in from things like globalization. Right now we're fighting the thing called the varroa mite, which came from bees in Asia. And the bees in Asia have adapted to it, but the bees here have not adapted to it. And so rather than let all the bees who are not adapted die and raise adapted bees, we're trying to poison the mites without poisoning the bees. And that's not working very well. So the things can go extinct. I mean, humans have not been around very long. It's quite possible humans could go extinct. So,
funnily enough, we just researched the varroa mite in the making of this school project type thing.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we learned kind of how it slips into the broods and then poisons them for when they grow up into big bees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now they're big enough so that the beekeeper can see them. And so what we do to keep the mites down, we don't try to eliminate them. That seems to be impossible. But we take a sample of the bees and put them in alcohol and shake the alcohol, and it kills both the bees and the mites. And the mites fall off the bees, and then we can count. We know how many bees we sampled, and we know how many mites we found. So we know the percentage of infection by mites that we've got. And then we design a treatment that's suitable for that. But it seems to be a losing battle. I'm not sure how it's going to work.
Yeah, that doesn't sound good for the bees.
No, in the long run, the bees will adapt. But in the short run, let me give you the example of New Zealand. There were no varroa mites in New Zealand. And then when the first mites came, the beekeeper said, okay, well, we can just let the mites go, and it will kill most of the bees, and the surviving bees will be adapted. We can do that. But the farmers who were growing kiwi fruit and all the agriculture that grows in New Zealand said, but that's going to ruin our agriculture for years. And the beekeeper said, yeah, that's true. There won't be any food from New Zealand for a while. And they said, well, we can't afford to do that. And so they started poisoning the mites to protect the bees. And so it was the right short-term decision, but it was the wrong long-term decision. And that's the way humans are, I guess. We're not too bright.
So it's a little bad that we ended on a sad ending on this, but we don't have any more questions for you.
Well, I think I like a line from George Carlin. He says, the earth doesn't have a problem. It's the humans that have a problem. And the planet doesn't have a problem. And the planet will shake us off like a bad case of fleas. So I think in the long run, things will be fine. Yeah. But I do expect some chaos in your lifetimes.
Today, me and Oliver have learned many things. The varroa, backyard beekeeping, and how there's a lot of bee-related chaos in the next century. I hope you have learned something from this podcast too. I hope what you learned can prevent the extinction of bees for about, forever. We also hope that after this podcast, your empathy has grown for bees. Goodbye, and have a nice day.